today, our special guest, appreciate your time, Doc Fisher. Question to you, which, how should we call you? The man who knows everything about boxing, the guy who...
No,
not that. Okay.
Yeah, they're more knowledgeable people than me. I'm definitely an aficionado.
Aficionado
The history of the sport. But I don't feel secure in identifying myself as a boxing historian, maybe amateur historian, but you can call me a veteran boxing journalist or editor-in-chief of Ring magazine, or online boxing pioneer. You know what I mean? Starting out with House of Boxing in the late 90s. It kind of was, by the way, House of Boxing wasn't the first boxing website out there, but I think it was one of the first to catch fire, and to catch the eye of venture capitalists that put money behind it, and pushed, instantly making it a job for me as opposed to a part-time gig or a hobby.
Okay, I did not know
all of that is true. So you could say, it sounds funny, because it was, we're just talking about, whatever, less than 30 years ago, 25 years ago, basically, but it was still sort of the beginning of something that became the norm, which is, they called it new media, which is the .com, the .com boom.
Yeah.
And then there was the .com bomb, and we survived it as Max Boxing. And, Max Boxing was a subscription online boxing publication, and probably the first of its kind. And through Max Boxing, I really sort of cut my teeth as a young boxing journalist. And now I'm an older boxing journalist. So you could say veteran boxing journalist, online boxing pioneer, but I think I prefer editor-in-chief of Ring magazine because it's such a iconic brand, and I never thought that I would be a part of it, let alone at the helm.
102 years old. We spoke about it before I realized I didn't press the record button. So this is like the first part is take two for us. Everything else is going to be, it is what it is. 102 years old. We also discussed the fact, probably the handful of publications, the print publications are still circulating after hundreds of years.
I can't think of. Can you think of, off the top of your head, 5 print publications, whether it's a daily newspaper or a monthly magazine or even a quarterly, that's over 100 years? It's very rare. And
off the top of my head, not really.
Yeah, what I was saying is we're firmly in the social media age. So when I started really covering boxing full time was the beginning of the internet age. And that new media age, it was a new medium, and there was multimedia aspects of it. But when it started out, it was still about reading. It was still about the printed word. And now that we are firmly in the social media age, it's not just rare to read something in hard copy and print. It's just rare to read anything at length. It's rare. So it's a blessing for the brand to still be alive. It's a blessing for the magazine in some shape or form to still be coming out every month, even though it's mostly digital. And we'll have, before the end of the year, we'll have something, at least 1 or 2 special print publications, and that's something that I want to try to get back into a regularly scheduled rotation. But it might take some time just to get it to quarterly. But it's a goal of mine, and it's a worthy goal. So I'm going to try. But it's very rare, so it's a blessing, and it tells me how. And it's not me; it's a group effort, and it's not even this group. It's the brand itself. It's the name, the ring itself. It's the place that it has in the boxing world, and the place that it has in American publication history, that it endures today, and that people still give a damn about the ring championship belt or the ring rankings. Even if they complain about it, they're aware of it, and they care enough to talk about it. And that, to me, that means something.
And I am old enough to remember when there were a major television station basically recognizing only Ring magazine, like HBO, for example. It was the time.
Good old days.
The good old days.
I think they're gone. I think those days are gone forever.
Yeah, they are.
But
gone, but not forgotten. But you know what? You touch about the topic, which is, you know, dear to me because I'm a couple of years older probably than you. I think for sure more than couple. And talking about the actual reading, I remember when there were no long forms, when every story was like, to make a story, it has to be like 3-4 pages at least. Now, if a story is bigger, you probably saw it on the internet or anywhere, like there is like the sign, the long form. There is no such thing like
they'll say this is a 10-minute read.
Oh, exactly. This is my point.
Just so you know, you're gonna have to invest.
What does it
10
mean?
Minutes.
Yeah, like, or you know, the story cannot be longer than 7 sentences. In which world? In the world we're living in. I mean, it's
that's the social media.
But you still prefer, if you could, to you know, I know you do, because if you read Ring magazine, you know the stories are longer than 7 sentences. So if you can just sit down and say, okay, let's write the story which you're gonna write. It's a long form or whatever. But
I'm geared towards that because that's what I like to read growing up. That's how I learned about the sport.
Exactly.
Beyond just watching the fights themselves on TV, the fights weren't enough. I wanted to go beyond the fights. I wanted to know the fighters, and I was such a geek. I wanted to know who the trainers were. I wanted to know where they were from. I wanted to know if they were non-American. I wanted to know about the boxing scene in their country. I wanted to know about the boxing culture. I wanted to know about their country's culture, the ethnicity, whatever. I wanted to know about all of that, and the only place I could find that was the boxing magazines. And to their credit, they did. Like before I ever saw a fight, a tape, a VHS tape of a fighter from Thailand, right? The fighters who were like the well-known champions at the time, like KSI Galaxy, right? Or the champions out of Japan or Korea. I read about them, usually in Ring magazine, but there was a lot of other magazines. Boxing Illustrated, there was Boxing Scene, there were what became Ring magazine's sister publications, KO magazine. It was a rival in the early 80s, and then I think by the end of the 80s they were owned by the same company, London Publishing, and so KO magazine became Ring magazine's sister publication. And there was also World Boxing, and there was Boxing 89, Boxing 90, whatever year it was just Boxing 91. And I read them all. I saved my money, and I bought all of them. I would spend a lot of money.
Do you still have them?
I do. I
could grab a bunch of them. I have some of the
Ring magazines that I first bought off the rack when I was 11, 12, 13 years old.
But when you were buying them, you were thinking from the beginning, okay, I'm going to read them and put them aside. Maybe I'm going to read it again.
I was a comic book collector, so I kind of had it. I save stuff.
Oh, got it.
I save. I have books. I have books that are 40 years old, boxing books, and they're beat up. They're well read. I didn't just read them. Like I consumed it. I would read it over and over, and I would go through with highlighters or pen and underline stuff and circle things that that
caught my attention or that I
disagreed.
Reading and learning, not just reading.
Yeah.
So when you go back to anything, which is a book, it's a whatever, it's a learning book, doesn't matter. When you come back and start putting the signs or this is what I like, it's learning, not only just reading. Two different things.
I was like that. I was like that with everything. If I'm reading the back of a cereal box or the back of an album, I would, if it was mine, I would like draw on it, or I would underline. If I had a favorite song, I'd maybe underline it a couple times, or I would put stars. I had like 4 stars for my favorite song on the album, 2 stars. It's just a way of it was a way of entertaining myself, and I did the same thing with Ring magazines, or not just Rings, but any boxing magazine's rankings. I would go through and I would kind of like, if I disagreed with the order, I would kind of like, put like a little arrow saying, no, this guy should be here. This guy should be here. I'd circle, and this guy should be out of here, or in my mind, if I was matching up fighters, like if there was like, if the junior welterweight rankings are right next to the lightweight rankings, if I thought a good lightweight fight with a junior welterweight would be entertaining. I would like link them. You know, I'd circle both now. I would link them, and I would put in the margins. This would be a good fight. You know.
Damn. Any of those ever happened?
Yeah,
those
a lot of times.
Imaginary cross.
That's how you knew. Hey, that's how I knew. Especially in retrospect, when I go back and I look at these magazines from the 80s and 90s, that the sport was vibrant and healthy. I did get those fights. We, the boxing fans, did get those fights. I even have one from, it's either 93 or 94. It's like Oscar De La Hoya is a hot thing. He's a prospect, but he's not yet proven himself. And I circled his name. He's like a junior lightweight at the time. And maybe he had a title, but it was the WBO belt, and Ring Magazine didn't recognize the WBO back then. And he wasn't at the top of the rankings. There's a bunch of guys ahead of him, rightfully so, you know. And I circled his name, and I put arrows to Gennaro Hernandez, who was he was rated ahead of him at junior lightweight, and I put arrows to Rafael Reyes, who was a top-rated lightweight, and Jorge Paez and Jesse James Leja and all these. And in the next year, as a matter of fact, the very next year, he fought all those guys in the same year.
Did you show this to did you ever show the Oscar those? You should come on.
No, he'll probably think I'm trying to kiss his ass. You know,
I know
he's embarrassed. Honestly, I'd be kind of embarrassed, but yeah, I should do that. But here's the thing: it wasn't just him. I was doing that with all these guys.
Oh,
you know, I'm circling Pernell Whitaker, and I'm saying, you know, I want to see him fight Oscar eventually. I want to see him fight Ike Corte, which never happened, although it almost happened. I want to see him fight Felix Trinidad, which did happen. I want to see him fight this guy, that guy, Buddy McGirt, you know, which had probably happened by then. Yeah, that had happened by that. They fought in '93. That first fight I was at. I was a grad student at Columbia, and I saw that fight in the theater at MSG. But yeah, I'm just a hardcore fan. But in retrospect, when I look back and I look at all those marks that I put through the rankings, everybody was fighting everybody. You didn't get all of the matchups you wanted, but you got most of them. So there was some fan satisfaction.
Imagine now making those imaginary fights. You would wait decades. I mean, if ever.
10 years, yeah, and I don't do it anymore because it's frustrating.
Exactly.
I don't even pontificate about it anymore, especially when it's like Gen Z, like the guys. And I remember everybody was real excited about. Might have been pre-pandemic. Might have been like 2018, 2019. All these guys, some of whom have accomplished a lot. And some of whom, like Ryan Garcia, have blown up in terms of their popularity and their name. But there was Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davis, Shakur Stevenson, who was a little bit lighter at the time, who was a featherweight at the time. And who am I leaving out? Oh, Devin Haney. And they're all there, and everyone's like, oh, we got like a new era of the 4 Kings or the 5 Kings or whatever.
I remember. 4 Kings. The 4 Kings idea and the sentence, I think, so circulated even later than that. I mean, not later, like into the pandemic.
Yeah, it did.
Years. I mean, because some people were laughing about it, saying, "Okay, remember the original 4 Kings and so on." But you know, everyone deserves the Kings.
But they're not doing it enough. They don't fight often enough.
Yeah.
And my problem is when they do fight each other. I mean, we've had Ryan Garcia versus Tank Davis, and I mean, it wasn't a bad fight, but it wasn't a special fight. And
no.
See, what made the 4 Kings special is not just that they fought each other; that more often than not, it was a very special fight.
Because they were champions. They were champions with unbelievable following. Beside, there was no Instagram there or social media. They accomplished a lot more. I mean, I am not taking anything from Tank, but I'm going to take a little bit from Ryan Garcia. Tank was much more established than Ryan. Yeah. I'm talking boxing-wise, not
more
other stuff.
Yeah, more experience, more mature, for sure.
Same thing.
He deserved to be the favorite. You know,
we knew that. But you mentioned something about Oscar, which I want to ask you about it, because Oscar company owns the.
Oscar himself owns Ring Magazine.
Owns, yeah. Oscar,
I mean, it's like a part. It's a subsidiary of Golden Boy Enterprises, but I think it's
Golden Boy Enterprises. Yes.
It's under the Golden Boy Enterprises banner because Oscar wanted it. Richard Schaefer did not want to buy a magazine of all things. So Schaefer wasn't into it, and he was just thinking like a businessman. He's thinking about the bottom line and understanding, the trajectory of print media. I mean, even in the 2000s, newspapers were going out of business, magazines were going out of business left and right. Why take that on? And they're not a publisher. They're promoters, and they had their hands in other things. They were they owned or at least partially owned a soccer team, a professional soccer team. The Houston Dynamo. I think they had that for a while. Mm-hmm. They had their hands in other things, but it was like sports. It wasn't publishing. But it was, something near and dear to Oscar's heart. So, he's held on to it, and that's why the Ring has endured. That's why it survived past 100 years, because there's been, post Schaefer, there were people in charge of the business who wanted to get rid of the magazine just because they just didn't see any need for print. They didn't understand it. They didn't think, it was worth the expenditure, which is totally understandable. But from my end, it's like, you got to put into something if you want to get something out of it, and they weren't willing to do that either. So, and then others, they were into the Ring brand, but they just not the magazine. They were into it as, just something that exists on social media, something that exists as a website, something that is mainly a platform for live and streaming and video entertainment. And fair enough to them, but to me it's a magazine.
It is.
Because I'm a boxing fan of a certain age, and it's like, no, it's a magazine. That's what sets it apart from everything else. That's what makes it special, and you can't get rid of that. And that is a big part of the brand. And you can do all this other stuff and you can merchandise, and I'm all for that, but it's at its heart, it's at its root, it's a magazine. And Oscar understood that, and I think he's the reason along with myself and the people who were the Ring staff at that time. Tom Gray, who's no longer with us, he's with Sporting News now. Tom Gray and Brian Hardy and Lamar Clark, who's the designer, and a guy named Ken Goditis, who was like the distribution circulation director, and a woman named Deborah Harrison, who was the controller, and really kind of the de facto publisher, because she came from the publishing world. She understood it. It was just our will that just pushed back. Anytime an executive tried to go around Oscar, and they would do it all the time. Mm-hmm. And they would lie and say, well, Oscar wants to get rid of it, and I just pull rank. I'd just be like, well, I got to hear that from Oscar, and then they back.
I mean, then
what I mean, and that's but that went on for years. It ends until it finally was, until it was just like it really was like post pandemic. It had gotten so expensive. It's just like it didn't make any sense to print these unless we literally sell every issue for $30. And at that point, it's like we might as well be publishing books, but so.
Yeah, it is. Talking about Oscar, do you guys have a lot of conversation about? I'm not going to say editorial, because I know you well enough that you're not going to have the conversation with him, but just a friendly. Okay, I am Oscar de la Hoya, one of the best fighters in the last 25 years or of his era, no matter which class, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And now I kind of don't agree, and of course you can disagree with person, but any pressure on him, like think differently, whatever your opinion about the fighter or fight is, or not really.
Oscar's hands off.
100%.
I've literally never heard from Oscar directly if he's upset about something. It was one time.
Okay.
It was recent, actually. And he was pretty cool about it. And it was via DM, and we had presented Terrence Crawford with a special commemorative Ring magazine belt after
I remember
Errol
that.
Spence, and it looked different. Looked
Yeah.
like a pro wrestling belt almost or whatever. And he was like, "What are you guys doing? Why would you change the belt?" And I'm like, "We didn't. That was a commemorative belt." He's like, "Okay,
Oh, okay.
don't fuck with the belt. Keep it as it is." Like, no, we love the belt the way it looks too. You know. He's like, "Yeah, don't do that." I'm like, no. That's it. That's the only time I've heard directly from Oscar, and the only time since I've been editor-in-chief. Now I know Schaefer would lean. He would lean on us. Like Schaefer was like his thing was the pound for pound. He wanted to own that, and he wanted Golden Boy fighters on there because it was like a marketing tool, or I think he believed it gave them it added to the leverage they had with negotiating with HBO. You know, like, hey, Adrian Broner, this isn't just some talented champion.
What a name! What a name in 2024.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you know, once Schaefer left, and that was like early 2015. We don't hear from them. And then I took over as editor-in-chief at the end of 2017. And the only time I had any pushback from Golden Boy, and it wasn't from Oscar. It was when Canelo tested positive for clenbuterol.
Yeah.
And we're like, listen, man, we're gonna, when we let him know, we said, listen, it's our policy, you know, and you know, listen, we know Canelo's cooperating with everybody, cooperating with VADA, cooperating with the Nevada State Athletic Commission. But if they suspend him, per our policy, we got to drop him from the rankings. And they're like, what? Well, he keeps the belt, right? And I'm like, no, we strip him of the belt too, man. You know, I think this is Eric Gomez, and he's like, oh, he stays in the pound for pound, right? Like, no, he's dropped. You know, he's not. He won't be in the middleweight rankings. He won't be in the pound for pound, and he won't have them. Like, well, that's not fair. It's like it's not his fault.
Yeah,
this is like
Canelo is also not fair. So
yeah,
I love Canelo though, but
yeah. So there was pushback, and when they did suspend him, we're like, we got to drop him. Like, don't you dare drop him. Don't do it. And we went back and forth. Like we didn't drop him or strip him immediately. It was like maybe a month later, and we were going back with. We weren't going back with the company. We were going back with the guy who was the publisher at the time, who worked with the company. His name was Stefan Friedman, and to Friedman was being like a liaison. He was like being a go-between, and he was like, guys, you got to understand, you know. If this fight had taken place in Texas or New York, it would have gone on, you know. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but it took place in Nevada, and per their rules, you know, they have strict liability. And I'm like, yeah, but read the statement from the, you know, they basically cleared him. And I'm just like, what do you want us to do? We're in a bad position here, and we just went back and forth, and they finally did. I will give them that. It wasn't immediate, but they finally did. You know, by the time like when they did have the postponed fight in September of that year, Canelo didn't walk in as the Ring magazine champion. He didn't walk in as being ranked at all. You know, and matter of fact, and this was a mistake by the broadcasters, I think Gennady Golovkin was announced as the Ring magazine middleweight champion. But that wasn't the case.
I was there. I had see all those three fights, but I don't remember that.
Pound belt. Yeah, I had awarded him a pound for pound belt.
Yeah,
and I think they took that in the ring with them.
Yes,
but I remember hearing. I got to go back and look at it, you know. But I think
they did. But
he wasn't. It was up for grabs. It was basically.
By the way, what's the coincidence that we are talking about the case when remember they stopped Munguia to fight Triple G because they said he's too young, and we're gonna have Munguia fighting Canelo, who was part of this deal in the less than a month.
It's it's the most traffic pages on the ringtv.com website. Yeah, more than the homepage.
But pound for pound, or weight class by weight class.
Altogether, really. But when you first go to the rankings, what you see is the pound for pound. And I will say the pound for pound is what people like to talk about and debate the most.
If you can remind everyone who doesn't know how many people actually, it's not like one or two or three guys. There's much more. I know many, but tell me, maybe something changed.
But not all of them. It's a lot. I mean, it's about 20, but not everybody chimes in every week. The people who every week they have something to say. It's Anson Wainwright. It's Tom Gray. It's Adam Abramowitz. Tris Dixon's pretty regular. We got a new guy from Thailand, Wasim Mather. He's pretty good. Out of Japan, but he's also based in the U.S. Daisuke Sugiura. Yeah, we have, those are like the regulars. We have a regular Diego Moria. Sorry, my
Argentina
pronunciations. Yeah, Diego he's every week. So we have a lot. We have a lot of regulars, and I'm proud that they're not all in the U.S. and they're not all Americans. You know, it's a lot of different time zones.
Yeah, a lot of,
and I'm not. Yeah.
But there's no bias. I mean, we hear it.
Here's the thing: everybody has their bias. Everybody has their bias.
Yeah, their own personal view. But I would not call it bias. I would call it the personal opinion based on something. But because if somebody has a bias, like, okay, this guy is good, but he's from,
When I mean
another
bias,
example, he's from Russia. Maybe not. It doesn't really.
Right. What I mean by bias is like they have different values, like in terms of how a fight is scored.
Yeah.
When to really recognize a prospect as a contender, like all that's different. Like there'll be people who right now they think there's certain prospects should be in the top 10, maybe because they're familiar with them, you know. And then there's others that are like, this guy, he has to fight somebody, or they'll believe like to be a contender, you have to be firmly at that 10-round or 12-round level. You have to have a couple of fights as scheduled for 10 rounds or 12 rounds, you know. And so it's different. It's different values. Maybe bias was a bad word, but
yeah, I know
different values. But the beautiful thing is it comes together, and it's usually like a really good discussion. Sometimes it becomes a debate. Sometimes it becomes a heated debate. Every now and then it becomes an argument. And I'm okay with all of that because I want the panel members to be passionate about what they're talking about, and I want them to be just as passionate about an unknown strawweight as they are the best known welterweight or heavyweight. You know, it can't just be about the glamour divisions. It has to be about all the divisions.
No.
Can't just be about the pound for pound. It's got to be about and we have to be vigilant. We got to keep an eye. Oh, a name I left off who's also new, Jake Donovan. Every week he gives his 2 cents every week, and he also contributes to the women's rankings panel. So, and it's good.
The newest great addition to Ring Magazine.
Yeah, much needed. Yeah, we needed a news hound. We needed somebody who's going to be on the phones every day and breaking news and covering the sport. And he's real versatile too, because he can write feature stories. He's a good deadline writer. And I think we're pretty strong in those departments, but we weren't, prior to Jake, we weren't strong in like immediate news. And instantly with Jake coming on the team as a senior writer, we're strong in that department. It makes me feel good.
Fantastic. But you mentioned the word that I am very passionate about it. You said you like you guys being passionate about it. I am you guys working or not. It's the word prospect. What does it mean for you? Because I had with people who are covering boxing for 30 years, I am having never-ending discussion who the prospect is. For me, this is very overused word right now. I mean, you're winning five fights versus no one's, and people start circulating the word prospect. For me, prospect is the guy. But I'm going to listen to it. This is not an interview with me. This is an interview with you. Who is the prospect for you?
There's the rare fighter who is so accomplished as an amateur, and I'm not talking
Lomachenko.
I'm not talking about Lomachenko. He's the quintessential example of this. He was so accomplished as an amateur that you had to watch his pro debut, and they had already announced to the world that they wanted to fight for a world title as soon as they could, right? So you're going to watch him. So, but just based on his amateur background, his prospects were good. So he was a prospect. Matter of fact, he was Ring Magazine's prospect of the year, being 1-0.
Yeah, the second fight he fought for the world championship. Not many people
he was going to fight. He was going to fight a ranked contender. He was going to fight a world title holder, and that was Orlando Salido. And you know, win, lose, or draw, the at least on our in our opinion, he was going to do well enough to be ranked. So once you're ranked in the ring rankings, you're a legitimate contender. You can't be a prospect if you're a contender. But for me, a prospect is not in the ring rankings yet. I'm sure a prospect can be in the sanctioning body rankings, because you can be a prospect and you can fight for a WBC US title or a US silver title or a. I know some really good prospects right now that hold the WBC Continental Americas belt, but they just stepped up to the 10-round level. And last year they were fighting 6-rounders and 8-rounders. You know what I mean? And I know they're still learning. So to me, a prospect is still learning his craft. A prospect is not too old. A prospect can be in his or her mid-20s. I think a prospect can be in his or her late 20s if they got a late start in boxing. But I always
Joyce.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And before Joe, especially heavyweights. Before Joe Joyce, you had Ray Mercer, you know, who's turning pro at like 28. You know, and Antonio Tarver also turned pro in his late 20s, and they were prospects who were in their late 20s, but not for long, because it didn't take them long because of their amateur background, just like Lomachenko. They could be moved quickly, and they established themselves as legit contenders really soon. So to me, it's like you're definitely a prospect. You're not a prospect if you haven't proven yourself as an amateur and you turn pro, and just because you knock over 8 stiffs. That's good matchmaking. You know, that's what that is. You're not a prospect yet. You're not a prospect because when you're fighting at the 4- and 6-round level, especially if you've been signed by a major, you know, promoter, and you've got major managerial backing, and that promoter or manager is aligned with a major network or platform, you have a united front wanting to protect you.
Yeah.
It's their business. All of them. They all have the same goal, which is to build you up and make you look like the next Sugar Ray Leonard or the next Oscar De La Hoya or the next Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, whoever. They want the public to believe that you're invincible, you're explosive, they want to get you excited the way people were excited about a young Mike Tyson. And people got excited about a young Mike Tyson because he was knocking people's heads off. So, like, let's find some
Mike
guys
Tyson was fighting 4 or 5 times. Mike Tyson was fighting 4 or 5 times a year, and those guys are being like, you know, like the, you know.
Oh, no, they're milking
the golden shot.
You're right.
The word I'm using.
At best, they're fighting. You know, at best, they're fighting like 4 or 5 times a year, right? So, no, those guys aren't prospects. They're not. You know, you have to prove yourself a little bit to say, hey, is prospects are good as a professional. So for me, I'm gonna wait. Like, I'm not gonna have somebody as a Ring Magazine Prospect of the Year winner or Prospect of the Year candidate if they're still fighting at the 4- and 6-rounders and they're beating up fighters that they're supposed to beat up. Yeah. Now, if they're at the 8- and 10-round level and there's some recognizable names in there, you know, and I'll give you an example. There's a guy who's not signed, who's you know, a Southern Californian who's he was a good amateur, and he fights in the 140-pound division. His name is Ernesto Tito Mercado. And he was fighting last year. He fought guys, long in the tooth, right? You know, guys like Hank Lundy, right? But at least I know who Hank Lundy is. He'd been there and he'd done that, right?
It was a mismatch.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Lundy's done, and it was, but he's at least I can recognize that name. And then there were some fighters on there who, at the very least, are fringe contenders. And they're giving world-class fighters rounds, competitive rounds. There was a South African dude that he fought. Took him the distance. But this South African dude takes everybody the distance. He just took Raymond Muratalla the distance this past Friday on ESPN. Yeah. So the fact that he beat that guy, I'm like, all right, man, you're a prospect. Yeah. You're not yet a contender.
I agree. I agree.
We don't rank you yet, but you're beyond the 4- and 6-round level. You're beyond 8 rounds. You're a solid 10-round fighter, and you're fighting veterans, and that says something. So to me, and you're a young guy, and you're still learning, so you're a prospect. Tito Mercado, got to watch.
This is very good point with saying that let's start calling someone a prospect who beats guys fighting in 8-rounder plus, because if you want to be not the contender because it's too close, like you want to be like top 25, we have to know what you can do on the normal championship level rounds. So let's say 10. You have to do 8 and 10s, because then, I mean, everyone could look good in 6 rounds.
4 rounds.
You know, I am exaggerating, but you know what I'm saying. It's a different boxing, the real boxing. This is the reason why 11 and 12 are championship rounds. The name is not just taken from nowhere. We know who you are in round 11 and 12, how I see it. We have to have it. We're going to go back to the what's happening now, because a bunch of questions I have, especially Usyk contra Fury. But I have to go to the Polish part of an interview. So everyone who is not interested, please, for the next 6 minutes or 7 minutes, we're gonna talking about Polish fighters. The only one with Ring magazine, his name is Tomasz Adamek. No one ever come close. Or Dariusz Michalczewski, was he close to get to be in a Ring magazine? I'm not going to ask about any of
that, but they weren't. His prime was the 90s.
Yes.
When he won his titles, it was the 90s, and we weren't giving out the belt back then. But probably when he beat Virgil Hill. Remember when they fought?
Yeah, they did.
And wasn't it was a unification, right?
Yes.
Darius was WBO, and maybe Virgil was.
And then Derek gave up the 2 titles, and he just.
Yeah, Derek actually had 3.
Three. He got 3 of them.
Darius had 3. Yeah. So and then he just held on to the WBO.
Yes, correct.
But that might have been. I mean, that might have been because when he won those sanctioning body belts, he inherited the mandatory that those fighters had.
Yeah, but Roy Jones Jr. was hanging around those times.
Defend against him in 30 days, or we're stripping you. You know, like some of them were ruthless. You know, they didn't want him to.
Some of them were
probably the IBF, because they were the one U.S. sanctioning body at that time. Then the WBO first established itself in Europe.
I think so. Derek Michalczewski was one of the most famous, if not the famous, WBO fighter. Remember, especially WBO was connected to Germany. Derek was connected to German promoter, Mr. What's his name? Klaus
Peter Cole.
Exactly.
Universal.
Peter Cole.
Universal.
So it makes sense. But if someone asks you the best Polish fighter, you have to think about it. You don't have to think about it. And
for me, it would be Tomasz Adamek, that I've seen, that I've covered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I covered some of his fights as when he was fighting as a light heavyweight. And at that time, I was thinking he's a thrill a minute. He's a Arturo Gatti type, because he had those fights with Briggs from Australia. They fought twice, right? And brutal.
Twice, correct.
Yeah. And they just went to war. And I knew about that guy because the Australian, at least for one of the fights, he was trained by Jack Mosley. So I visit Big Bear and I'd see this dude, you know, and nice guy, cool. You know, all those Australians are a lot of them are gregarious and cool cats and all. But then Adamek moved up to cruiserweight and fought Steve Cunningham. And twice, actually, he fought Steve Cunningham. But the first fight was at cruiserweight, and that was tremendous.
Classic.
What a fight.
Classic.
Yeah, I wish I was at that fight. I was watching it on a network. I think it was the Versus Network.
Yeah, it was Versus.
2008, 2009.
No, you know what? I think so. The second was Versus, because if I remember correctly, I was there, obviously, because it was Adamek. I remember interviewing Steve, and Steve is saying this is the first time that my fight will be televised in United States.
Yes.
As a cruiserweight, because as of today, the cruiserweights, like, who are they actually? Who are they? I mean, they are not light heavyweights. They are not. We have Bridgerweight. You know,
it's never caught on in America, which is weird because they're usually good fights.
Yeah,
The cruiserweight fights that I've seen in America, and I saw one just this past Saturday in my hometown of Inglewood, Zurdo Ramirez
exactly
versus Arsen Gulamarian. That was a good fight.
It was a good fight.
12 rounds, man. They were nailing each other. I mean, no pitter pat around. Yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all. My question is if it's gonna be a surprise to you if you ask 1,000 Poles the same question I just asked you. Who was the best Polish fighter you know? I am almost positive 900.
Oh, they're not going to say Gołota, are they?
They're going to say Gołota.
No.
Yes. No, not 50%.
I go back long enough that I even covered a few Andrew Gołota fights, including the Tyson
not 50%.
Michigan.
95% of them.
Wow.
And no thinking. I mean, instant response. Andrew Gołota. The phenomenon of guy who just went there and almost killed Riddick Bowe, or almost. The word almost is being used.
Shit out of Bowe.
But there is not even a
competition. Career.
There is not even a competition. There is like
maybe because he's kind of crazy, a bit of a wingnut.
He was first. He was
first. Okay, he was making a name, and he's a heavyweight. And I know Adamek went up to heavyweight, and he was really good at heavyweight. Matter of fact, I covered a fight of his in Ontario, California, when he fought Chris.
This is where we met for the first time.
Okay.
Areola.
Hey, listen, I thought Areola was too big.
You have me in the studio, man. I remember this.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it, man. And I thought, I didn't think that there would be any Polish support for Adamek in Southern California, and I was wrong.
You were wrong.
Like, okay, man. Hats off to the Polish fans. They show up.
We have very passionate.
I thought seriously it was just New York City, Brooklyn, and Chicago. Oh no, and Newark.
There is nothing going on in Chicago because we have the worst commission in the world. Not in the United States, in the world by far. If you speak with any promoter, U.S. promoter, let's come to Chicago, or forget it, all the promoters, Eddie Hearn, whoever, Frank Warren, Chicago. No, we don't want the headache. And it will make so much sense. Chicago, we have Puerto Ricans, we have Mexicans, we have Latinos, all the possible, Irish guys, Ukrainians, second biggest number of Ukrainians outside of New York, if I am correct.
Got black people. You have lots of black people who are boxing fans.
Sorry for me.
You got everybody, man.
We have everybody. We have no boxing. But we have no boxing.
No, I guess it's the commission. That sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, and no, it's unworkable. I mean, many people tried, and every time when they tried and they said no, we never gonna do it. We never gonna do it again. Before I ask you about, you mentioned the cruiserweights are pretty good. Yeah, one of them is gonna possibly end with all the heavyweight belts. Alexander Usyk. This is like one of those questions why we never know. I never understood why cruiserweight division it doesn't work in United States. It works everywhere else. Do you realizing this? 2024, 2023 was great when it comes to the fights. Some of the people were saying, maybe even I heard you saying about it, one of the best years in a long time. The fights we actually did see. Can 2024 overshadow it? Plus involvement of Saudi Arabia,
that's why
making
it does. Big fight. Yeah,
I see both sides of the coin. I mean, I love what they're doing now.
Yeah,
but the other part is, and maybe I'm completely wrong because I am not the guy who is getting this $30-40 million. I mean, after they stop paying, the money that the great fighters, they are great, who are fighting in main events, made it. They don't have to fight. Not for a year or two. They don't have to fight for a decade.
Some of them will retire if they're getting long in the tooth. You know,
Anthony Joshua just said the maximum 2 years. Today. Said maximum.
Yeah. Joshua, Fury, Usyk, with the money that they're making, with what they've already accomplished, they feel satisfied that their legacy is intact. And these fights that are happening in Saudi Arabia, they are legacy fights, so that's important too. But the real reason they're happening is the money. The money's incredible. It's once in a lifetime. They know this. Everybody around them knows this. They're going to get the bag, as the kids say. And once they get that bag, they're going to be less inclined to step back in those rings, you know, and not because they're scared or they don't want to fight.
No, not at all.
It's just they're satisfied.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, you know, I've sacrificed a lot to get to this point, and I am set financially. Let me exist with my family and see what that's like for a while. Some might come back, you know, if there's another bag or if they just get bored or whatever, but I don't know how long the Saudi boxing thing is going to last, because it might dry up after this big group of heavyweights. After, you know, there's certain fights that His Excellency wants to make that are the best fights to be made in certain divisions, like Artur Beterbiev versus Biblii. That's as good as it gets at 175 pounds. Beyond that, maybe they can get the winner of that fight against David Benavidez. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. That's something worthwhile, but it could run itself out by the end of 2025.
Do you see Canelo fighting in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, probably before he retires, yeah. That it will take Saudi Arabia for him to step in there with David Benavidez.
First of all, do you pay attention to so-called linear title? Is it important for you to being linear? Because it's what I hear,
it's not like it used to be. It used to be when with the fighters' activity and you know, there was a period in the I want to say the 90s. There was a period where you weren't getting undisputed champions, so it was like, okay, who the man who beat the man who beat the man was more important. But the thing is now is once you get an undisputed champion, and we're getting it more often, that's the man. Okay, it's this, you know. And then to me, what's more important is the best fighting the best. That's what ring is. And I have a lot of people say, well, the lineal championship is just as important. People do this to me all the time on social media, and I say, if it's so important, give me the lineage. How far back can you go? And they don't get back to me. And they've got BoxRec. They can just go to BoxRec real quick, and they don't do it. I'm like, okay, well then tell me the lineage. If it's so important, if that's the real champion is the lineal champion. Because I'll tell you right now, Tyson Fury is quote unquote lineal. Yeah. But is he? Yeah. There's a question in that. Like, yeah, you were the lineal when you beat.
By definition, he is.
But then you spun out of control. You disappeared. You basically retired. You know, how long does that lineage? How long does it last? You know, and I see, and I respect these people. Cliff Rold is a historian, right? Mm-hmm. And he's way into lineal championships, and he put something out. He has a Substack, and there's a free email that he puts out where he lists all the champions, and he lists the lineal champions and the most title defenses by a lineal champion ever in a particular division, and the most lineal title defenses by the current lineal champion. And he recognizes Tyson Fury as lineal champion, and he's got a bunch of like those fights that Fury had against like Tom Schwartz. Yeah. And that cruiserweight that he fought when he first came back. And it's like that. Come on, man. Those fights weren't even scheduled. Those fights weren't. I think he counts the Nagano fight. You know, like, well, he's lineal, so whenever he fights, he's defending this lineal championship. And I'm like, no, you can't. Nagano, you can't make that. That's not a championship fight. It wasn't. It was a 10-rounder, and the same thing with Tom Schwartz, and the same thing with I forget the guy's name. His first name is his last name.
Safari.
There you go. Very good.
This is the first. Actually, I did the story about it about 3 days ago. This is the guy. He was during the weigh-in. He was carrying him out. He got him on his hands. He was like carrying him out. It was a joke. And next one was Francisco Pianeta, and then was Deontay Wilder. So watching those two fights, I would bet my house. I would bet my house that Deontay Wilder is just gonna destroy him. destroy him. I was there for all the 3 fights, and I got like kind of interested because I am. And the first fight was in LA. Obviously, you know that, and I am there. There's like everyone is saying what the Deontay Wilder is gonna do with him, and I am just walking, and I see somebody singing, and from the people like calling me like, bring the camera, and I see Tyson Fury singing American Pie with his friends, and he was so unbelievably relaxed.
Yeah.
So then I start thinking, there must be something with this guy's mind to, you're fighting Sefer Seferi, Francisco Pianeta, and then you're going to Deontay Wilder, and you are completely relaxed. I thought this was the moment that I thought that he's for real. I still thought that Deontay is going to,
I liked him. I thought he was the better heavyweight than Wilder, but I picked Wilder in that first fight because I didn't think Fury. I thought Fury accepted that fight too soon. I thought he needed to knock more ring rust off. Yeah. I didn't think he was still losing weight because he was like 400 pounds.
Yeah.
And he lost weight for the Wilder fight, but he was flabby. He looked like an empty tire, and I didn't like that. And I thought that he would trouble him early, but then he would run out of gas and get clipped late.
Yeah.
And I felt like
almost happened.
He went down. Yeah, he went down in round 9, and I'm like, okay, he's out of gas. But he got up, to his credit, and went back on the stick and move and had the head movement and all.
He wandered around.
By the way, it doesn't take a whole lot to get Wilder to second guess himself. Like, doesn't take a whole lot to bottleneck.
Very good point.
But then there was the knockdown on the 12th, and I'm like, it's over, and it wasn't over, and that was amazing. And so after that, I'm like, okay, I believe in Fury. Like, going into the rematch, I was all Fury. I'm like, he's going to be better now. Yeah.
No, I mean, he knew whatever was waiting for him, no doubt.
Yeah. I was like, Wilder's not going to clip him this time. He's more sure of himself. He's taken Wilder's best shot.
Yeah. So for me, he's really a boxing chameleon, maybe like the guy I am wearing. So you never know from fight to the fight, because if you will judge Tyson Fury after Ngannou, then you will think guy with such a boxing brain and skills like Alexander Usyk is gonna, maybe not destroy him, because the size difference and everything else, but 20% chance to Tyson Fury. But I still think this is 50-50 fight.
Yeah.
Because every Tyson Fury, from fight to fight, it's a completely different guy.
Yeah.
Is it 50-50 fight for you?
Yeah, but my pick is Alexander Usyk. I like his professionalism. I like his mindset. I think he's the better overall technician, and I think he's the more consistent fighter round to round, and he showed me something in that rematch against a very motivated Anthony Joshua, that even against a giant who is hell-bent on hurting him, he can raise his game. And I think he did that in the finals of the World Boxing Super Series when he took on the Russian fighter that Abel Sanchez had.
Murat Gassiev.
Gassiev.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Gassiev. Gassiev hits like a heavyweight.
Yeah.
And he raised his game.
But he was injured. There was something with his right arm, as I remember.
Yeah, Gassiev.
But he wasn't able to throw.
I think he's still dealing with it, but still, I see how he raises his game, and I see when he's in tough. As he was against the Latvian fighter, Briedis. He can raise it. Like he can summon something in the championship round. So he has that.
Briedis was the guy who was the closest in my book to beat Alexander Usyk.
Yeah,
I watched the fight. I think so. He was Briedis was.
Harris is a brute. That guy is scary. Yeah,
come on. I know.
Brutal, man.
I asked Krzysztof Głowacki, who was hit with the elbow a couple of times. On purpose. But talking about Alexander Usyk, which is a special fighter. I mean, I am actually going to Saudi Arabia to watch this fight because there is a reason why I'm going, a special reason. I'm sure he remembers. If not, then his people do. When he fought for the first time in Chicago, he fought versus Washington, if I'm correct. Alexander Usyk. This was his first heavyweight fight. He fought in He fought in Chicago. Sold out place. I sit in front of him, like first row, the press conference, and I said, fighting like this, you're not going to be a world champion. I actually said it, and he looked at me, and we had the conversation like Usyk eyes versus me. Like I said, no, not fighting like this. I will never believe you're going to be world champion. So if he gets all the belts, I have to be there. I mean, you understand why? I said it, but it proved me wrong. I think so. He changed a little bit the way he is fighting. I'm going to defend a little bit myself here, but not a lot. But
I think he's more serious. I think there was a time after he was undisputed cruiserweight champion and he first stepped up to heavyweight, and he was out of the ring for a long time. I'd seen him at some events like the Boxing Writers Association dinner, and he had been drinking, and he was like, he's a happy drunk, he was in a good mood and kind of, and I was thinking, and something changed. Like he got more serious, he got more into religion or just more into his family. Maybe it's what's happening with Ukraine right now.
Oh, now it's a different motivation.
His head is screwed on real straight, and and when I talk to him, he is to me, he's the most mature, professional, and confident of all of the elite heavyweights.
Very intense man, isn't he?
Very intense.
By the way, Egis Klimas for sure is gonna call you about the Alexander having a drinks. I see Egis calling right now. I didn't publish yet, but he's
years ago. I think this is pre-pandemic, but it was hey, listen, it's fine. You can find one on for a night, everyone drinks at that dinner.
Yeah.
I'd had a few, but I did wonder, and I didn't like his form against Witherspoon or against Derek Chisora.
Yeah.
I had my questions.
Yeah.
It took him a while to get it together against Chisora.
I agree.
But I tell you what, those 24 rounds he did against Anthony Joshua, man, that's some pound for pound level stuff right there.
Next 5 minutes will be the last 5 minutes. Appreciate your time, big time. David Haney contra Ryan Garcia. Very discussed fight for very wrong reasons.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's like
blame Ryan for that.
Say it again.
Said blame Ryan for that.
No, this is what I'm saying. I mean, let's put the tweets and Instagram post by Ryan, and you can put the book together in 25 minutes. I don't know how many hundreds of them there were. Nothing to do with boxing. Right. My question to you is, was this a smoke screen or was this Ryan Garcia?
I've gone back and forth on this. At first I thought he's cracking up. Mm-hmm. He doesn't like the pressure. He wants out.
Yeah.
And then I thought, nah, you know what? He's a social media age kid. He's been attached to social media since he was a young teenager. I met him when he was like, I don't know, 16 or 17. Mm-hmm. He was still fighting. He couldn't fight in the U.S. He was fighting in Tijuana, and he would go. It was before he signed with Golden Boy. But he would go. He and his parents would go to certain Golden Boy shows and all. And he was with the Instagram back then, and the stuff before that's not even around anymore, like Vine and that type of stuff. And he's grown up with that, and it's like it's a symbiotic. It's part of him relationship.
Yeah,
it's like what's the word? You call it like when somebody, it's like a dysfunctional relationship. Codependent.
Yeah,
there you go. Codependency with his following and this medium that's connecting.
I have to post something.
And in a way, he's at their mercy. And in some way, and it goes back and forth on what he's like. At first, I was like, "Oh, he's cracking up," but even when he was posting the stuff about like Satan cults and stuff like that and being kidnapped and crazy stuff, at the same time he was posting silly stuff, and you know, he was engaging in beefs with Jake Paul and Sean O'Malley and maybe Billie Eilish and some other pop stars or whatever.
Everywhere,
like,
everyone.
It's like, no, dude, it's, you know, people aren't threatening your lives or trying to take over your bank accounts or whatever. You're just trying to, you just need attention. Like, that part's real. The need for attention is real. He can't let go of the phone. That's real. Now, can he split his time and energy between, you know, this, which is a business for him, but it's more than a business for him. It's a way of life. Okay. His social media followings. Can he split that with training for a real fight? Like, not just a big event. This is, he's in against a real champion, like somebody who was undisputed at lightweight, somebody who's gone. I didn't think he won, but he did do 12 rounds with Vasily Lomachenko.
I
good enough
think
to go 12 rounds with Lomachenko and at least be competitive. So he's in a serious fight. Can he really be ready for this fight when he's still devoting this much time and energy to his social media following? And can somebody like slap the phone out of his hand? I don't think his parents will do it. I don't think they can, because they rely on him. His whole family relies on him. He's the breadwinner. And that's not, I'm not throwing shade at Ryan. That's the case for a lot of fighters.
No, we all know how this thing works.
Yeah, you know.
But
and
you know what?
So no one's going to tell him. Even his trainers don't tell him what to do. They're all along, and even like, you know, Joe Goossen's going into the Hall of Fame. I have the utmost respect for him, but he was along for the ride, and it looks like Derek James, you know, former trainer of the year, he's along for the ride. He's not. There's nobody saying nobody. There's no old school trainer slapping him across the face and saying it's my way or the highway. So I do think he's going to.
Joe Goossen is this guy.
He's going to fight, but I don't.
Weren't you thinking that Joe Goossen is one of those guys who is going to, you know, just basically impose his will?
I think
he would be.
Yeah, I think 80s and 90s Joe Goossen would slap him across the face, you know, and say get out. But he's older and a little softer, you know what I mean? And you know, it's a good payday. And
but for me, Devin Haney.
Let me just say this about the trainers. I get it. I know it's a criticism, but I understand where they're coming from, and I understand from a trainer standpoint, not just the need to make money, because trainers get fucked over all the time.
Yeah.
Financially, you know, they get screwed over by everybody. But I also understand from a trainer standpoint the challenge of, you know, looking at Ryan Garcia and seeing the physical tools and seeing the natural ability and talent and saying I can work with that, like wanting to do something with that if he'll listen. But the thing is, he won't listen. He doesn't listen, and everything he does has to be recorded. It's like a reality TV show with him. So I have to ask, like, what are we getting? Are we getting like 70%? Are we getting 50%? Because it seems like he's splitting half, at least half of his energies to live streams and, you know, all the stuff that he's producing. He's a content creator. He sees that as much of his career as being a boxer. So I have to wonder how good he's going to be.
Cannot exist with another. I mean, the moment he understands it's too late, 3 years from now, if he gets knocked out in the first 2 rounds versus Devin Haney, nobody will remember who he is. So, and for me, if you can find out the one fighter that you have to be not 99%, but 100% concentrate what you're doing is Devin Haney, who is for me, it's a complete opposite of Ryan Garcia. Opposite. Yeah. Everything is the boxing is number 1, number 2, and number 100 for Devin Haney.
Yeah, Haney is number 1 focused on his craft, number 2 focused on his legacy.
Yeah, and this is what you're supposed to do.
He's old school in that regard. He's old school.
The last question, because I know it's already late even in Los Angeles. The best fight in 2004 you would like to see, but nobody's talking about. Let's call His Excellency. With idea.
Well, you know, if if David Benavidez has his debut at light heavyweight, David Benavidez versus the winner of Bivolov Beterbiev, that's something I would be really interested in. I just think it would be a good fight. I think it'll be if Bivol wins, I think it's a fascinating style matchup because Bivol is a pure stick and mover. Here's the thing: if Bivol beats Beterbiev, he's going to have to give a chunk of himself in that fight. To go 12 rounds with Beterbiev, even if you box the perfect fight, you're going to take some lumps. He's going to take something from you. So I wonder, and if Beterbiev wins, he's just at this age where he could fall off the cliff. At some point, Father Time is going to jump on his back, and it's going to be heavy. He's going to feel it, And I do think David Benavidez is that type of fighter who could push an aging fighter off the cliff, even if they're a great fighter like Beterbiev is. I don't know. I've in previous years I've been pretty firm in believing that Bivol has the right style to beat Beterbiev, but Beterbiev's last couple of fights, it's just like, jeez, man. He keeps putting it in my face that he is a bone breaker. He is such a brute, and he is a really good technician as well. He has good footwork, got a good work rate. He's very good. I think I still slightly favor Bivol, but I see it as like a 55-45 type of fight. But I do think the winner of that fight versus David Benavidez, I would love to see that. And I would love to see the winner of that fight against David Morrell. That fight will never happen because Morrell's like nobody.
That's the real boogeyman.
But I think Morrell
of boxing.
Brilliant. Yeah, he's a brilliant talent. I don't know how good he is because nobody of note is willing to step in.
But he has a Ronnie Shields. If you can choose one trainer for him, it will be Ronnie Shields in my book.
Yeah.
One of the guys who doesn't take, known for answer, you're going to do it. I mean, and all the knowledge. I'm a big fan and friend of Ronnie, but
Ronnie's great. Ronnie's one of these guys I feel bad for because Ronnie he's soft spoken, and he doesn't have a huge ego. And a lot of trainers these days, especially these boxing dads, man, they love attention. Some of them love attention more than their sons, and but the squeaky door gets the oil.
Yeah.
Like, the only boxing dad that's not going to get any credit is Naoya Inoue's dad. You know what I mean? Because he don't
invisible. He sits in his tent.
It doesn't matter what he does with Naoya or Takuma in a way. It's like he's not like the U.S. boxing dads or such big mouths, and even some UK dads. I know Tyson Fury's dad's got a loud mouth as well. But these guys, but those are the guys that people pay attention to. Those are the guys that pop up. It's the brighter personalities. It's the folks that are doing interviews like this and stuff like that. They're terrific trainers in their own right, but that definitely helps these days. And I feel bad for these trainers that are like Ronnie Shields that have been around, paid their dues, always show up and do a great job. And but it's kind of under the radar.
They are. We did 90 minutes. So we did football game, soccer game in America. And so we did 90 minutes. I don't know how many rounds it is. Let's say this is 40 rounds. 40 rounds with Doc.
Rounds, not bad.
It's a little bit less than that. Yeah, it's like 30 rounds with Doc. Doc, appreciate it. Let's do it sometimes
let's do it again,
in the future. I do up. Afloat for the next 102 years. I hope it's possible.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All the best, my friend.
Thank you.